Imagine a single man so powerful that when the U.S. government ran out of money, it had to beg him for help. Not Congress, not the president, one man. His name was John Pierpont Morgan, J.P. Morgan, the banker who could summon billions with a handshake and who quietly built the foundations of modern American capitalism. But Morgan's empire wasn't born out of charity. It was carved from risk, manipulation, and ruthless control. His rivals called him the Napoleon of Wall Street. His allies called him America's banker. But the truth is more unsettling. J.P. Morgan may have owned America more than America owned itself. Act 1. The Birth of a Banker. J.P. Morgan was born in 1837 into a world on the edge of change. His father, Junius Morgan, was already a wealthy financier in Europe. Young Pierpont wasn't raised in poverty, he was raised in privilege. But privilege was only the beginning. From childhood, he was taught that banking was not about serving people, it was about controlling them. Morgan's early years shaped his character. He was plagued by recurring illnesses, including a skin condition that scarred his face and a childhood bout of seizures. This gave him a reputation for coldness, a man who rarely smiled, rarely laughed, and seemed to carry his pain inside. To him, weakness was unacceptable. Power, he learned early, was survival. By his 20s, he was already working with his father's London banking connections, bridging Europe's old wealth with America's raw ambition. And he had one advantage no one else could match. He understood that America's future would be built on steel, railroads, and electricity, and he was ready to own all of it. Act 2. Building the Empire. The mid-19th century was chaos for American industry. Railroads were collapsing, companies were failing, fortunes were being lost overnight. But where others saw disaster, Morgan saw opportunity. In 1871, he partnered with the legendary Anthony Drexel to form Drexel, Morgan & Co. It quickly became the most powerful private banking house in the United States. And Morgan's method was simple. When industries collapsed, he stepped in, reorganized them, and demanded control in exchange for his rescue. One of his first great moves came with the railroads. During the Panic of 1893, railroads were going bankrupt left and right. Morgan bought them up, merged them, and eliminated competition until only a few remained under his thumb. He didn't just fund railroads. He controlled the tracks, the prices, and the flow of goods across America. If you shipped anything by train in the late 1800s, you were paying Morgan. Then came steel. In 1901, Morgan orchestrated the creation of U.S. Steel, buying Andrew Carnegie's Steel Empire for nearly $500 million, the largest business deal in history at that time. With one stroke, he controlled the backbone of American industry, the steel that built bridges, skyscrapers, and warships. But Morgan wasn't finished. His gaze shifted to the invisible force that would change the world: electricity. He backed Thomas Edison, funding the creation of General Electric, which lit up cities and forever transformed how Americans lived. Morgan wasn't just financing companies, he was financing the future. Act 3. The Man Who Bailed Out America. By the turn of the century, J.P. Morgan was more powerful than the president, and in 1895 the U.S. government proved it. The Treasury was running out of gold, facing a financial collapse that could destroy America's credit worldwide. President Grover Cleveland had no choice but to turn to Morgan. In a single night, Morgan assembled a $65 million gold loan from European bankers, personally rescuing the U.S. economy. Newspapers called it Morgan's coup. America had been bailed out, not by Congress, not by democracy, but by a single banker. It happened again in 1907, during the Panic of 1907. Banks were failing, the stock market was crashing, and riots threatened the streets. Once again, Morgan locked the nation's top financiers inside his library in New York. He forced them to sign deals, stabilize the banks, and save the markets. When the sun rose, the panic was over. One man had prevented America from falling into financial ruin. But his power frightened people. How could a single private citizen hold more control than the entire government? The backlash was so strong that Congress eventually created the Federal Reserve in 1913 to ensure that never again would the nation depend on a single banker's will. Ironically, even in limiting his power, they were following his example. Act 4. The Legacy of Morgan. J.P. Morgan died in 1913, leaving behind an estate worth about $80 million. But his true wealth wasn't measured in dollars. It was in influence. He left behind an empire of banks, railroads, steel companies, and electric grids that became the backbone of America's rise to global power. And yet, his reputation remains conflicted. To some, he was a titan who stabilized markets, built industries, and dragged America into the modern age. To others, he was a monopolist who crushed competition, manipulated governments, and concentrated more power in his hands than any elected official ever should. Even today, the echoes of Morgan's empire are everywhere. J.P. Morgan Chase, one of the largest banks in the world, still carries his name. General Electric, U.S. Steel, and countless companies still trace their origins back to his deals. So who was J.P. Morgan really? A savior of American capitalism, or its greatest tyrant? Was he the man who built modern America, or the man who bought it for himself? The truth may lie somewhere in between. He was not a hero, not a villain, but something far more dangerous. A man who proved that in the age of money, power does not belong to governments. It belongs to those who can control the flow of capital. And in that sense, J.P. Morgan was not just America's banker. For a time, he was America itself.